Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again today. I got some great feedback from you all yesterday, so I just wanted to share that the format's going to change slightly. We're going to make it a little bit shorter, and that's why you see in the title 14 minutes at 1400. I'm going to try and bring this out every weekday while we're in the lockdown, so for the next 3 weeks or so. 1400, South African time. Let's have an aviation chat. I want to talk a bit about this helmet right now. I took it out the other day because I was using it as a prop for these talks. And I can remember feeling extremely proud the day that I got this helmet. And every time I put it on for the air show. This is the helmet that pilots wear for the Silver Falcons aerobatic team, the national display team of the South African Air Force. And I had a strong sense of pride knowing that I'm part of this elite team and the great people that went before me, and just being a part of something bigger than myself. And it's a similar sense of pride that I felt last night and right now. Sitting watching President Ramaphosa give his live address to the nation last night. I'm proud to be South African today, to be a part of South Africa. He took bold and difficult decision to get on top of this pandemic. The president and his team showed courage and leadership, and before many of the first world counterparts did similar measures. Well done, Mr. President, to you and your team. We're going to do our part as Team South Africa to get on top of this pandemic. I don't want to dwell on anything about Corona, so let's move on to something more exciting about aviation. And today I want to open with a little bit about an introduction from Ernest K. Gann, a great celebrated author, in his book, Fate is the Hunter. And before we even get into the book, this is an exciting part. Is just the preface of the book itself is something to be cherished. So let me start here. I won't keep you very long today with the reading. He writes, "Fortunately, I was not obliged to rely entirely upon the tricky concoctions of memory to prepare this book. No span of time is so carefully documented as the working hours and minutes of a professional pilot. The facts are firmly recorded in fine-lined logbooks, and to the initiated, the bold, uninspiring figures can easily be revived into actuality. It must appear from following these pages that the pilots were solely responsible for the near miracle we know as air transportation. They would be the first to deny this distortion of the truth. But quantitative analysis of credit belongs in formal history and not in a fleeting series of observations which merely intend to create a sensation of being there. The men who drove the spikes on the transcontinental railroad were just as important as the final efforts of the Indian scouts who preceded them. It is simply human that we prefer to read and write about the Indian scouts." Ernest K. Gann, Fate is the Hunter. So that leads me to some thoughts about my talk today. Firstly, there's been a lot of great people along the way who've allowed me to get to this position where I am today. And I thank you for all your bits. We've all been part of a greater team, and oftentimes people get the limelight. Pilots, there's a bit of an excitement about the aviation career, the profession, and people often ask questions of a pilot. But quite seriously, no pilot can get airborne without a wonderful team behind of support staff getting this aircraft in the air, from the smallest mission to something wonderful. And where he talked about in the beginning, he doesn't have to rely entirely on his memory. He's got the fine lines of the logbook. This morning I was looking through my logbook, and there you can see the fine lines of the logbook. And it's amazing because what he says is, I've subscribed to it completely. I can look at this line here and see who I flew with, look at the date, look at the aircraft type, how long it was, what the mission was like, and it takes me right back to the flight itself. It's a wonderful thing, being able to keep track of exactly what you've done. And there's not a lot of careers that have that kind of detail about where you were in time and space, and who you were with at the time, and what you were doing. But a pilot's logbook is something like that, and it's wonderful. So this picture came out today, and this is going to represent the story of what I want to talk about today. So I'm going to spend the next sort of 6-7 minutes on the story about a Maritime Patrol serving in the South African Air Force. And please post your questions. Let's make this back and forth interactive. I've put some links there if you want to send me an email or log into the webpage as well. But other than that, we'll climb into the mission profile and deal with your questions in the sort of last 4 or 5 minutes as we wrap it up. So, Maritime Patrol. I served in the South African Air Force at 35 Squadron in Cape Town, based at Easterplaat, and we used the Turbo Dakota, the C-47 TP, that we used as the maritime platform. And the maritime mission is got 2 roles, really. The first being search and rescue. Should anyone be at distress at sea, our exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, runs up to 200 nautical miles out to sea, and we're responsible for these waters. It's effectively another province. So we patrol those waters, and the patrol normally happens at about 1,000 feet above the sea. So you can imagine it can get quite lonely far out there. Once you hit about 60 miles or so at 1,000 feet, you can't see the land anymore. You can head out off Cape Point and just head straight south and just keep going. After a while, you won't see any land, and it's just blue all around you. So I'm not talking about, the 2 roles that I'm talking about really is the search and rescue. If someone's in distress, we'll go and try and find them with some loose coordinates or some information that we have in the time. And the second role is the maritime, is the shipping side of things. So are there people doing illegal fishing activities and the like in our exclusive economic zone? In other words, in our territorial waters, are they fishing illegally without permits? So obviously, I'm not talking about your fisherman who just goes out to sea in his small fishing boat catching his own quota. This is commercial fishing on a large scale. If you're in the region of 100 nautical miles out to sea and you're a private fisherman, well, you're a brave man. So the mission profile of Maritime Patrol. The aircraft is a maritime platform on board, and there's quite a few key roles. And the first person in charge is the mission commander. Now, this is usually a senior navigator or a senior pilot at the squadron, and they'll be in charge with the suitable qualifications of the whole mission. The mission starts with a briefing, and the mission briefing takes place at the squadron headquarters, usually about an hour or so before we start walking out to the aircraft to start the profile. After the mission commander, we have 2 pilots. The one is the pilot flying, and the other one is the pilot monitoring, and this role alternates on every alternate leg. Behind the 2 pilots and in the cockpit is the flight engineer. The flight engineer has a critical role looking after the engines of the aircraft and just being a bit more technical on board the aircraft. And if we're away, he takes care of the aircraft and outstations too. But also, he has a crucial role, which will come up shortly, and I'll tell you about the profile once we are approaching a target shortly. Outside of the cockpit and behind the flight engineer is the maritime panel. First person sitting up will be the navigator. Usually there's 2 navigators on board, and once again, I'll get back to you shortly about why there's 2 navigators. It's an intensive job, and that's the reason for it. We'll get to it shortly. Next to the navigator, there's the first radio operator, and his job will be radar. So he'll sit there scanning his radar screen and seeing what's out there. Next to him will be another radio operator, and his job is radio. He has contact on the marine band frequency with the ships. After the second radio, there's the loadmaster, who, once on board the aircraft, his role is to look out of the windows. Now, on the maritime platform, usually towards the rear of the fuselage, there's 2 very large windows. The one loadmaster will sit at the one side looking out, and the air photographer will sit on the other side looking out of these large windows. And that brings me to the air photographer. Now, his role is to take photos of any of these activities at sea. He has a critical role here, which we'll get to shortly. So it starts with the briefing. The input happens from all the necessary people. The crew walk out together and get airborne. Once the aircraft is airborne, within a few minutes of getting airborne out of Cape Town, we'll be over the coastline, and that's where feet wet checks begin. In other words, simulating. We've crossed the land now, we're over the ocean, we're in the mission profile now. Now, even though the captain is flying the aircraft, the mission controller is in charge of the operation. And each person in this high-performance team has a role to play, and each role is important. So let me paint you a scenario of flying out of Cape Town and doing a maritime patrol towards the east and ending up in the Port Elizabeth area. The profile could be 3 to 4 hours long, way out at sea, somewhere around 120, 150 miles south of Cape Point, and heading eastwards. Long, long way away from land. So The aircraft usually flies at about 1,000 feet in the patrol phase, and there could be cloud around. So even at 1,000 feet, which is now safe because there's no poles and buildings and trees out there, you can operate along in the cloud. You're guided by the navigator who's running the mission profile of where we're going ultimately in this patrol. It might be a band that we're operating between 100 and 160 miles, and they've pre-worked out the route along the coastline 100 miles out. The radio operator who's on radar will sit there scanning his radar screen, and it's somewhere around 60 or 70 nautical miles. He might pick up a target on this display that's now tracking in front of him. Bearing in mind, this individual is sitting in his panel, looking up against the screen with no window in front of him. And you might be, as the pilot, sitting in the front, looking out and seeing what's going on. And if you're in cloud, the individual at the back looking at the radar screen has a better picture of what's going on than you do. So once he picks up a target, the navigating of this aircraft gets handed over to radar, and radar will now track the pilot onto the target. And it starts from 1,000 feet and gently starts the descent, and it'll give constant headings until the last few minutes, where it will deliver the aircraft at 200 feet, abeam the ship. Shortly before there, the flight engineer will take out his binoculars as soon as he can pick up the target and start scanning to see the call sign on the ship. He'll read the call sign over the radio to the radar operator in the back, who will then consult the shipping index and find out if this shipping is legal. If the shipping in question has the permits, carry on. We'll continue on here from an exercise point of view. We'll go through the motions, we'll take the photo and practice for the next time. If they do not have a permit, it's critical now that the photographer gets a great photo, the light on the correct side, with lines in the water so that activity is underway. Radar operator will direct the pilot close to the aircraft. The air photographer will say on the starboard or the port side that correction will be made, and as they come past the ship at 200 feet, the air photographer will take that photo, and now we have the information. At the same time, somebody will call Mark. The navigator will mark the position on his map, and now we have reference in time and space and a photo of the activity at hand. I see we're running kind of long here, but let me just wrap up the story and I'll take your questions. Please send them in if there are any. It's critical now that the air photographer looks after this camera and keeps it in his possession, and every single step along the way from the time at the end of this sortie, getting off the airplane and keeping this camera secure, such that when the application goes in to prosecute this fishing vessel that was fishing illegally, the evidence is untampered with. There's been many cases where there's just been a case where the camera was handed over or the photos were downloaded and passed on to a third party, and the evidence is then thrown out of court because it's deemed to be tampered with. So in this role, you might think that there's a mission commander, there's a pilot, there's a radar operator, but actually the crucial role in this maritime patrol is the air photographer. If there's any evidence that needs to go in untampered with, he's the person that is responsible for that. And I want to bring that back to South Africa right now and say, just remember, guys, we all have a part to play. We're in this situation together. And although you might think you have a small role to play, even just staying at home with your family and doing something that you can on your own without interfering in the neighborhood, in the community, that could be your role to play. And in the next few weeks, that could make all the difference. I see a couple of comments coming in, and I said that towards the end I'll take questions. There are no official questions yet. So hello, Gert from Stellenbosch. Thank you for saying hello, and Willem and Deb. Thanks for signing in. Just some feedback on yesterday's question. If you have any questions about how to start, where to begin, where do I start this process of becoming a pilot, I have some information for you now. Please send me an email. I've written down my email address there. It's alex@alexmacphail.co.za. Drop me an email. I will then add you to the mailing list. Shout out goes to my fearless leader, Major Alex van Oostveen, who was the leader when I was wearing this helmet over here. Thanks very much. Please tune in tomorrow, at 1400. I'll keep it live every weekday. Post your questions, sign up on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and maybe even sign up on the webpage. There's a high-performance newsletter that'll go out too. Thanks for being with me today. Stay safe. Play your part. Cheers, everybody.